leaders, not political hacks. We are entrusted to be guided by our conscience, and while I suppose it's easier in theory than it is in application, even my worst detractors have no valid claim that I can be bullied, that I can be bought, or even borrowed for a special interest. I really truly do care about all of you. But here's what I'm not going to do anymore. I'm not going to pander. I'm not going to rule and lead on probation. I'm going to follow my heart. And here's the issue. The Democratic Party in Florida is dead. But there are good people that can resuscitate it. But they don't want it to be me. That's not convenient. It's not cool. The Republican Party has a lot of problems. I said, and you've heard me say, that the pendulum is going to swing so far, and the gluttony so strong and so viscous that it's going to swing back. I'm not having a Jerry Maguire moment right now, like, who's coming with me? But that's the truth. The party that my dad volunteered for in JFK when he was 18 years old in 1960 is not the party today. It craves and screams anarchy and then demands amnesty. That's not okay. I've always been criticized by the far left and by the far right. But you know what the small businesses and the hardworking families and the teachers and the cops and the firemen want us to do? Be public servants, not politicians.
Those part of Senator Pizzo's remarks yesterday. So has the death knell truly sounded for the Democratic Party in Florida? That is the question I posed to UCF political science professor Aubrey Jewett earlier today on Fox 35 News Plus. Senator Pizzo said yesterday that the Democratic Party is dead, but also said there are good people to resuscitate it. So I want to get your take, Professor Jewett. Is there a pulse for the Florida Democratic Party, or is it time to write the obituary?
Well, maybe a little of both. You know, the obituary part comes from the fact that just a few years ago, Florida was considered one of the most competitive states for presidential elections anyway. And since then, we have seen Republicans take a giant lead in party registration, about 1.2 million voters today, whereas back then, Democrats still had a small lead. And in voting behavior, it's been even worse for Dems, even better for Republicans. So that's sort of the obituary part. But you know, on the other hand, there still are millions of Democrats in the state. There are still some very talented politicians who are Democrats in the state. And so what they have to do is figure out what policies can they push to bring voters back to the Democratic Party. So probably a little bit of both right now.
We also know he's the third sitting Florida lawmaker to leave the Democratic Party in the last 6 months. So should that be concerning to Democratic voters across the state?
Well, yeah, I think to Democratic voters and to Democratic office holders, when you saw a couple House members get elected as Democrats and then shortly thereafter switch parties to Republicans, that makes you have to think as a Democrat, you know, why are they doing this? I mean, first of all, you get upset about it because, hey, they got elected as Democrats and now they're switching parties. But then I think, you know, you have to do some soul searching and saying, why are these people changing parties or leaving the party? In the case of Pizzo, he didn't change all the way over to Republican, but he has left the Democratic Party.
We know, and we've been tracking for a while, the change in voter registrations in the state. We know the GOP holds an edge of more than 1 million voters, and that continues to grow across the state. If the Democratic Party is dying in Florida, what is the cause of death?
Well, I think it's probably two main things have caused these big changes in voter registration. The first was the COVID-19 pandemic, that once in 100-year pandemic, and Governor DeSantis' response to it. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is the change in Hispanic voters primarily, but some Black voters as well. Quickly on each, for the pandemic, originally DeSantis was pretty much like every other political leader in the country, sort of struggling to figure out what to do because by definition, a once in a 100-year pandemic, right? You don't have any experience and you don't know what you're dealing with. But once we got, say, 6 months, a year into it, he just decided it was time to reopen the state. And then he took fairly strong stances against mask mandates, against vaccination mandates, and these sorts of things. And that really attracted a lot of new voters to the state who were disproportionately conservative and Republican. Before that, we were growing fast as a state, but we were getting about an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. But anyway, so that really attracted a lot of new conservative Republican voters. And then the other thing is Hispanic voters. For many years, a lot of political analysts thought that Hispanics, on average, especially as the Hispanic population grew in Florida, that would help the Democratic Party because throughout most of the country, historically, Hispanics have been more Democratic. But here in Florida, what you saw was, especially down in South Florida, a lot of Hispanic, Cuban Hispanics, Venezuelans, and others really believed when Republicans charged Democrats for being socialist. And so that was the other big change is you just have seen an enormous number of Hispanics either changing party registration or younger Hispanics as they have gotten to be 18 and registering the first time or choosing the Republican Party.
Professor Jewett, let's talk about 2026 and the governor's race, because I don't think these things can be taken in isolation. We know the Florida Democratic Party, in their response to Senator Pizzo, said they called it a temper tantrum for failing to get support behind a gubernatorial bid. But this also comes as a former Republican Representative David Jolly switched his affiliation to Democrat ahead of a likely expected, anticipated run for governor.
Yeah, with Jason Pizzo, it is interesting because he's had a leadership role in the Democratic Party for some time. And then for him to say, oh, the Democratic Party's dead and this sort of thing, well, that's sort of an indictment on your own leadership. As some other Democrats pointed out, they said, hey, he's been in leadership. So if there's been failed leadership, it's on him, right? And you have to figure that a big part of this decision is not just about the party politics, but it's about his desire, Jason Pizzo's desire to run for governor. And so I think he's positioning himself. He once before said he wouldn't run as an independent or an MPA, but it appears that maybe he's changed his mind and figures that he has a better opportunity to win if he runs as an independent or NPA than he does as a Democrat. I might add our own, well-known lawyer John Morgan here in Central Florida seems to be taking the same path. He had left the Democratic Party a while back. Now he's been talking about potentially running for governor, but doing it under a third party label. And then on the other hand, you do have David Jolly, former Republican, who's now switched to the Democratic Party because he feels like his best path forward to run for governor is to do so as a Democrat. So yeah, some of these decisions are more about the individual person's strategy about what's the best way to move forward to run for governor than they are about an indictment more broadly about the party system.
So, what do you think are the odds we have in this governor's race coming up in 2026? A Republican candidate, a Democratic candidate, a potentially high-profile NPA candidate, and an even higher-profile third-party candidate in John Morgan.
Well, yeah, it would be interesting. In American democracy, usually when we get to a general election, it's two choices. It's a Republican or a Democrat. I mean, for most elections, for most voters, that's what they face. But theoretically, we could see a much more wide open gubernatorial race here in Florida with 3 or 4 candidates on the general election that actually have the money or the power or the political party backing to run a decent campaign. I would say my initial gut feeling is given how well Republicans have done in increasing voter registration, and we have lots of studies that show that voters who are registered with the party tend to stick with that party when they vote. A split election between 3 or 4 candidates probably is good news for Republicans because they have the lead in voter registration and their voters have historically shown they turn out and they're loyal. So, in one sense, having 3 or 4 candidates, not all with party labels, might actually work to the benefit of Republicans. But we'll have to see.
It's been interesting to watch already, and we are only halfway through, not even halfway through 2025, so still a long way to go, still a lot to watch.
Indeed, yeah, it's even though Florida politics has changed quite dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years, it's still quite interesting, and we don't exactly know what's going to happen. That's for sure. It changed rapidly one direction. You never know; it could always change back the other direction as well.
Keep it here on Florida Live. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer. Thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. It is time now for our Tampa Connection, and for that we go to Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay. Nancy, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Garrett. We're going to start today in Lakeland, where there was actually a deadly shooting at a restaurant last night that police are now saying was a case of self-defense. The shooting happened around 9:30 at the Cali Rose 15 Kitchen. Investigators say two men, Jesse Banks as well as Nicholas Liu, instigated an argument with a 24-year-old man outside the front entrance to the restaurant. Now, police say Banks actually hit the 24-year-old man on the head with a fist. When a fourth man opened the front door, Banks and Liu pointed a gun at him. That's when police say the 24-year-old pulled out his own gun and fired several shots, hitting both Banks and Liu. Police say Banks died at the hospital. Liu, on the other hand, is recovering and is expected to survive. Investigators say the shooter is cooperating and no charges have been filed. Garrett?
That sounds like a frightening situation there. Now, our second story, a lawsuit filed against a Bradenton Beach trailer park.
Yes, that's right. Residents at this Bradenton Beach 55-plus community, which is a trailer park, they suffered a lot of damage during Hurricane Helene. Many of them haven't been able to move back into their homes, but now they are actually fighting eviction. First, they dealt with Hurricane Helene, and then they were worried about possibly being red tagged by FEMA. But when 83 out of 86 homeowners were allowed to rebuild by the city of Bradenton under FEMA's 50% rule, they began cleaning up and working to get back into their homes. However, shortly after the new year, residents got a 6-month eviction notice. That's because while the residents of the community own their trailers, they do not own the land that the trailers sit on. The park property was actually sold to an LLC back in 2023. And when it was sold, the residents say that they were told they could stay in their homes for the next 5 years. They hope that their lawsuit will buy them a little more time to stay in their homes. Residents also told us that before they got this eviction notice, the LLC offered to sell the right to purchase 2 residents for $75 million. Now that is 4 times the amount which this trailer park property was appraised for in March. The residents also say that the LLC hasn't cleaned up the communal areas of the neighborhood since Hurricane Helene. Our reporter who was on this story went down there, and you can actually still see the watermark from Hurricane Helene in some of their communal areas, such as the showers and bathrooms. Garrett?
Oh gosh, just what a mess, and it has to be difficult to not having resolution to all of these things as well. Still so many questions, still so many things up in the air for those folks.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things up in the air, and these are senior citizens. Most of them are retired, so to have to go through the devastating blow of Hurricane Helene, having your property damaged and looking for a place to live, even if it's temporary, to then have your hopes up and you're rebuilding, you got permission to rebuild, you're starting to work, clean up, and then to be told that, hey, you know what, you're going to be evicted and need to find a new place to live. So there's definitely a lot of questions out there, and these residents are certainly fighting to stay in their homes. They were told that they could stay in their homes 5 years from 2023, which would be 2028. So they're hoping that, if anything, they'll be able to stay in their homes till at least 2028. But of course, we'll see how this all pans out.
All right, and finally today, more possible graves found under the parking lot at Tropicana Field.
Yes, that's right. This is a story that we've been following for years. More possible graves have been discovered underneath parking lots at Tropicana Field. And now a St. Pete City Councilman who believes that his great-grandfather is buried underneath Tropicana Field wants the area to be designated as historic. But of course, this raises a lot of questions about how that would factor into redeveloping the area around Tropicana Field. In July 2024, archaeologists with Stantec performed the radar searches at the old Oaklawn Cemetery site. Now, that was a segregated graveyard that closed in 1926. According to the results, Stantec found 7 possible burials and 3 additional areas of interest. That's in addition to what they found during a search in 2021, bringing the total number to 10 possible graves, 11 areas of interest, and 9 areas of disturbance. Those numbers were published in a report in November. Now, City Councilman Corey Givens Jr. is questioning why those numbers weren't made public. As I mentioned earlier, he does believe that his great-grandfather may be among those lost graves, and he is seeking to have this area designated as a historic, which he considers to be hallowed ground. But of course, this raises questions about how that historic designation would factor into development around Tropicana Field. Now, Givens says that he is all for redeveloping the historic gas plant district and the 66 acres surrounding Tropicana Field, but he doesn't want to disturb the peace of people who are buried underneath parking lots 1 and 2 of Tropicana Field. Now, Givens did put it on the agenda to discuss with the City Council next week. Fox 13 reached out to the city as well as Mayor Ken Welch's office, but so far we have not heard a response. Garrett?
More questions. Those questions starting to pile up for that development project.
Yes, definitely more questions. And of course, having this designated as a historic area definitely raises even more questions after everything we just went through the past few months and is still going on with the Tampa Bay Rays pulling out of the deal. So there's definitely a lot of questions surrounding it. Again, Corey Givens Jr. did put this on. He wants this to be an agenda item for the next City Council meeting. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon for our Tampa Connection here on Florida Live.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. Congressman Maxwell Frost was in Orlando earlier today holding a news conference outside the Orlando Social Security Administration office. He was warning of what he called mounting threats to Social Security from DOJ and the Trump administration, especially when it comes to cuts. He said that they are gutting Social Security Administration staffing, closing some field offices as well, and he's warning that folks may start feeling the impact of that. He cited statistics saying 113,000 Central Floridians count on Social Security benefits. Here's a little bit of what he said about that at a news conference earlier today.
Well, as you can tell, this is deeply impacting people across our district. Look, at the end of the day, I have some Republican colleagues who are saying the Democrats are making this up. It's political talking points. I had advocates, lawyers, people here in the community come speak in part so you can see that these are not political talking points. This is real. Elon Musk, who I would tell you is one of the most empowered people in the federal government right now, came out and said he believes Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. That's what they believe, that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. And so we're here to defend it, to fight for it. But again, it's not just about defending the system of Social Security, but making it better and strengthening it so it is here for generations to come. There are so many young people who don't believe Social Security will be here for them. And that's why we have to continue to fight and educate the public. So thank you so much for being here, and we're happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
I know that there's a line outside the door.
Yep, there is a line if you see right here. And actually, this is a little shorter than sometimes I usually see it. Sometimes it's a lot further down. And the Social Security Administration, we were just talking about this in the 90s, had more staff than they have now. And our population has grown. And so it just goes to show you that these cuts are not being done thoughtfully at all, and they're actually being done to destroy the system.
So those were some of the congressman's comments about that. After that, the news conference wrapped up. He also spoke with reporters about a number of topics, including the 15 University of Central Florida students whose international student visas we learned were recently revoked. He also talked about his trip to El Salvador and said that the country is facing a, quote, constitutional crisis because of the Trump administration's defiance of the federal judge's order to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to that country. Here is what Congressman Frost said about that.
I want to go back myself right now, but other members are going back, and I've had a lot of conversations with them. We were able to get some information for the family about his whereabouts, exactly what facility he's in, which is in Santa Ana right now. We were happy to be able to get that done. But again, you know, it's about the fact that people are being rounded up. People who, in many cases, have a legal status. Abrego Garcia had a legal status in this country given to him by a judge for fear of safety. And the fact that they're being sent to other countries is very concerning. The other thing is the Supreme Court told Donald Trump, facilitate his return to the states. And Donald Trump has defined that Supreme Court order, which shows that we're in a bit of a constitutional crisis right now. What they're saying is once they're overseas, there's nothing the administration can do. So what's stopping them from deporting any one of us to citizens to another country? And when the court rightfully says return them, they can use the same logic. They're in a different country out of our jurisdiction. That we have to stop this now.
So the students who are at UCF, they're being advised by international relations contacts at UCF that
To leave.
get on a plane, leave. While you're working on this, you're not suggesting that they stay here in a manner that could eventually lead to them being detained. You're saying go back now, fight it later.
I'm not giving anyone any personal advice on this. We're still looking at the situation. It's part of the reason we requested the information. Our office, doesn't give any personal legal advice to people because every situation is very different. But it's a damn shame that we have students here who have been studying at UCF. They're students there. These are people who came to this country because of the promise our country has for people. They were given a visa to come and learn, and because the president disagrees with their speech they're revoking their visas and telling them to go back to a different country. I mean, this is not what our country is about. And the polls show it. Actually, a recent Fox News poll shows that for the first time in a long time, the president is underwater in immigration. Most people do not agree what he's doing on immigration, and he's even worse underwater in terms of his approvals on the economy. It's interesting. He promised he would do something about lowering prices, and then he said he would be a dictator on day one, and people didn't believe him on the dictator thing, and they did believe him on the low prices thing, and it's the reverse. You should have believed him when he said he wanted to be a dictator, and you shouldn't have believed him when he said he was going to lower prices.
We'll be right back. More Florida Live after this short 2-minute break. Live look right now inside the Florida House, where they just gave final approval to HB 555. You saw it looked like it passed unanimously there. Meanwhile, discussions on the budget have really kind of stalled. We learned yesterday from the Senate and the House that the two chambers are still pretty far apart. There's a long way to go for an agreement on that state budget. The Senate President Ben Albritton said that he rejected the House proposal over concerns about lost revenue from the House's proposal that included a steep sales tax cut. So the House, as we saw, is in session today. The Senate has gone home for the weekend, but we also heard from officials yesterday saying that the session is likely to run long, whether with an extension or even a special session in order to get the budget done. So here's where things stand as of yesterday evening from Senate President Ben Albritton. You're also going to hear from Representative Lawrence McClure, the Budget Committee Chair, and House Speaker Danny Perez.
The Senate and the House, we have worked diligently over the last maybe couple weeks trying to figure out, where we could come to consensus on the tax issue. What we have is, and they've been great partners. They really have. And, we just have a philosophical difference on how to approach it. That really is it, and how it impacts future revenues and, how it affects future budgets. So, but listen, I am very confident that we are going to get there, right? Today, my statement today was about, our clock is essentially run out, and our members, we weren't sitting tomorrow. So obviously we had lots of members that were saying, hey, you know, can I go home, or what's going on? And that really was just an effort to you know, give them an update on where we are, and then, and importantly, let them know that they're free to head back home.
Do you think you'll be able to bridge those philosophical gaps next week, and then maybe pass the budget on a week from tomorrow and just extend a couple days? Or do you think we're talking about weeks-long extension?
Well, I think that has yet to be determined. My glass is half full. I have every reason to believe that the House feels that way as well. I mean, we're trying to figure out how do you take the two ideas and get it together. So, you know, the good news is we, you know, I at least, you know, I can speak for me, and I believe the Speaker would be as well. I'm not going to speak for him. I have immense respect for him. He's a good man. He's you know, has solid ideas as well. But, you know, my goal would be to just keep working toward this somehow, some way, in some fashion, and just keep thinking about, you know, how do we bridge the gap, and how do we find a balance? That's where we are, and I have every not just hope, but I have every certainty in my mind we will. And the reason we will is because Floridians need us to, and both the House and the Senate, we recognize that. So we're gonna work hard at this stuff like we have been.
Well, you were talking earlier about you know, philosophical differences over the budget and tax plans, but as you're aware, the budget usually is sort of integral to making things happen all around it, including other legislation. Mm-hmm. You currently have major differences on constitutional amendment reform, major differences on condos. Now they're taking an approach, I mean, you didn't mention it, but your Rural Renaissance bill has been placed in a bill that includes a major deregulation of a bunch of professions, which you all have never even considered over here. Given the fact that the budget will not be wrapped up by next, what's the game plan on, do you think you can get these other ideas across the finish line between now and next Friday? Or are a lot of bills in danger of dying because of the overarching lack of agreement on the budget?
Well, the answer to the last question is yes. There certainly are, I don't want to necessarily use the word likely, but, you know, you've characterized this exactly correctly. You know, we're going to keep doing our work. We're going to keep working to try to get good policy done. It's moving, you know, back and forth now between the House and the Senate. So, yes, sir, there are bills that have appropriations in them, Rural Renaissance being one of them. You know, we'll just, honestly, at this point, I'm playing it day by day.
So
I'm hopeful.
So on that point, I mean, if there is an extension to session, will that just be the budget? There's no plans to actually consider lingering issues on legislative issues, like a bill being considered at the same time during a special session?
Well, this is my first time doing this, but my understanding is that if the Speaker and I come together and build I guess it'd be a joint resolution or something along those lines to have a special session to work on this, you can include lots of things in those calls, is my understanding. So whether or not would it just be the budget, or would it be budget plus bills that have connectivity to the budget, we're you know, we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, we have a roadmap. Keep having conversations, iron out the differences.
Okay. But I mean, do you think is it too early to say extension, special session, how that's all going to happen? And
Yeah, I think so. Too early.
Too early. Okay. And do you anticipate, Mr. Speaker, there are unresolved issues out there on a lot of other items, including, you know, constitutional amendment reform and condos and things of that nature? Are you hopeful that you can get that other stuff, even if the budget's sort of in flux, can you get that other stuff resolved by next Friday?
I'm sure some of it will get resolved and some of it will not, like any other session. We're hopeful. Of course, we want good policy to pass, and if there are products and bills that are moving out of this chamber and heading over to the Senate, it's because we believe in the policy. And so, of course, we'd want to see that get done, but I'm sure there will be some items that never make it to the end. Well, we still have time. We have about a week left, and you know, there's still a lot of days left on the clock.
President Albritton called you a great partner in budget negotiations. Do you feel the same way about him?
Absolutely. I think we disagree right now on the current state of our conversation. But yes, I think he is a great person. I think he has a great heart. I don't believe that the way we see the world is the same way that President Albright sees the world.
So again, time running out on the legislative session. It is likely, and increasingly so, that there will be some sort of extension of that session, or maybe even a special session called to deal with the budget and get that passed. We are going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live and a live look at Kia Center on this Friday afternoon, just a few hours away now from tip-off of the Magic and the Celtics in Game 3. And the Magic, tell you what, really need a win tonight. Been a rough start to the series so far. So what can the Magic do to step up and get a win tonight? Tyler Caron joining us live now via Zoom. He's co-host and producer of In the Zone on 96.9 The Game. And Tyler, always good chatting with you. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Garrett, it's an important time of the year right here. Game 3, you're down 0-2 for the Orlando Magic. The defending champs are coming to town. It's a big day in the Orlando sports community. I'm happy to be with you.
It is a big day. Because of the situation that the Magic find themselves in. We knew it was going to be a tough series coming in all along, but it seems like they had to take advantage of the situation the other day with Jason Tatum not playing. I know he's still doubtful for tonight, but it really seems like that Game 2 was an opportunity that the Magic let slip away to steal one in Boston.
Certainly an opportunity. Jason Tatum is such a valuable player in this league and probably one of the more underrated players in this league, averaging 27 points in the regular season. He's one of the best defenders. I think it's a really underappreciated element of his game. And he's a big reason why Boston is top 5 in not only offensive efficiency, but defensive efficiency on the season. It was an opportunity. Jaylen Brown was unconscious at times. He finished with 36 points on the night to lead the Celtics. Good performance and emotional performance for Kristaps Porzingis. So this Celtics team, they're the defending champs for a reason. As far as it goes for Jason Tatum tonight, here in Game 3 in Orlando, still listed as questionable with that wrist bruise. So not sure if Jason Tatum is going to be ready to go tonight. Quite frankly, I don't know if we see Jason Tatum again in this series unless the Magic rather steal one and get closer to evening up the series. So we'll see how it goes tonight. Jason Tatum's still up in the air.
All right. Even if he doesn't play, how do the Magic make sure Jaylen Brown doesn't go off for 36 again?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and one that I think this Magic players, coaching staff, that everyone is still quite frankly looking for. You don't want to give up 36 points rather to any individual player. But I think that you can allow it with the Celtics team, as weird as it sounds, because the thing about the Celtics that makes them so dangerous is the depth and the consistency that you have from that depth, with Derek White and Peyton Pritchard combining for 49 points in Game 1, the 20-point performance for Kristaps Porzingis where he lived at the charity stripe, Derek White and Drew Holiday still giving you double-digit scoring, as well as Peyton Pritchard off of the bench. If Jaylen Brown is going to go for close to 40, you can live with that. If you are the Orlando Magic, it's limiting the other guys is a huge key to coming out on top here tonight.
We saw in that Game 2 that Paolo and Franz stepped up yet again, but the bench a little bit lacking again. So what do we need to see from the other players, the role players outside of this team's stars, if the Magic want to win tonight in a game that, frankly, they need to win?
Yeah, if you look at the series stats, Paolo Banchero is averaging 34 points a night. Franz Wagner averaging 24 points a night. Then there is the dip. Wendell Carter Jr., 10 points a night on the series. Those are your only three players that are averaging in double digits. That's not going to work against any opponent, let alone it being the Boston Celtics. So you need to find that third man who is going to step up and be consistent. This is a spot where Jalen Suggs lived for these type of moments. He's a reliable 15 points a night when healthy, especially in the playoffs, and coming at home in the hole down 0-2. Game 3s are where Jalen shine. You saw it last year. The Magic have the saying of protect the kingdom. Jalen Suggs is the king of the kingdom with his performance on the court and playing in front of that home crowd. Loose ball, diving on the floor for loose balls, the energy, the triples that he can hit, the explosive dunks, how he plays with the crowd. You need that type of role player tonight. I expect Cole Anthony. He hasn't been a big factor in this series. He has a lot of similarities of what he can do on the court that Jalen can as well. I think Cole Anthony could be the X factor tonight to be that third man for Paolo and Franz in the scoring department.
The game is at home, as you mentioned. We know this team seems to respond better at home. You talked about playing in front of the crowd. Do you think this team will get a lift tonight just from being back in Orlando and playing here?
No doubt. You think about it. I talked to head coach Jamal Mosley today. I passed assistant coach Dale Osborne in the hall at shoot around this morning, and both of them preached a similar message. Listen, you were in Boston for 6 days and to play 2 games in the playoffs. The team took advantage of it. And some employees that were up there did. It's a nice day to be in for that time. Nothing compares to putting your head on your own pillow at the end of the night, and to do it. So the routine to be back home is already an advantage. And then to have 19,000 of your hometown faithful cheering you on. This Magic team has finished 500 at home for the last 2 years, a bit down this year compared to last, but this is still the Palace that the Magic call home. Getting in front of that home crowd, it is a huge lift. It is contagious for the performance on the court when you are getting cheered on rather than getting booed every time that you touch the ball.
All right, the last thing I'll ask you here, the one key if the Magic are going to win tonight against the Celtics.
You have to continue to hold them from their normal shooting percentage and scoring attack. You cannot get in a 120 to 125 game with this Celtics team and expect to win. The Magic have done a good job with that. You're holding the Celtics to 107 in this series, down from their 117 in the regular season. They're making 4 less threes in this series per game compared to their regular season. The shooting, the scoring, and the turnovers. Magic already capitalized on that. 15 in game 1, just 7 in game 2. Boston makes your life miserable from buzzer to buzzer. The Magic are adjusting to combat that and still get into their offense and limit those turnovers. Those will be 2 keys on both sides of the ball tonight.
All right, Tyler Karen, co-host and producer for In the Zone on 96.9 The Game. Always good talking with you. We appreciate you joining us, and let's hope for a Magic win tonight.
Garrett, thank you. Big one tonight in the O.
All right, tip off at 7 o'clock. Keep it here on Fox Local. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer. Thanks for joining us. The NFL draft continues tonight with rounds 2 and 3, but it was the Jacksonville Jags who really shook up the whole draft by trading up to the second pick and drafting Travis Hunter, the wide receiver and cornerback out of Colorado. He's also from West Palm Beach. They picked him and really changed the landscape of that draft. Earlier today, I had the chance to talk with Tim Walters, the sports editor of the Florida Times-Union and Florida Today.
Yeah, well, if I was going into the draft thinking I was going to end up in Cleveland and then I ended up in Jacksonville, I'd be pretty happy too. It's also only about 5 hours north of where he comes from down in West Palm Beach. So, our partner website, the Palm Beach Post, they had a story with his dad last night because, he's from down that way. And then, of course, we were all over the coverage. Super happy, surprised, obviously, to see it. The new GM, James Gladstone, said that they were working on this for about 2 weeks with Cleveland. So pretty good job of keeping it a secret. It never leaked out. And, one of our guys here in Jacksonville, Justin Lewis, he wrote a story last week saying the Jags should push all their chips in the table and go after Travis Hunter at number 2. Seemed a little far-fetched at the time, but now we're proud of Justin. Good job there.
Yeah, how about that? So I'm sitting there watching the draft last night. They announced the trade, and I said, this means they're going for Hunter. I mean, it was the only kind of possible explanation for that at that point. So what does this do for the Jags now?
Yeah, I love what it does offensively because now you're partnering Travis Hunter, and I think his skill set as a receiver a little bit better than as a corner, but he's still very good there. But you're pairing him with Brian Thomas Jr., and you had to make a splash there because if you look at what they did this offseason, they traded Christian Kirk, who is a very good receiver for them, but he's been injured the last couple of years, traded him to the Texans, and then Evan Engram, who's kind of been their main target the last 2 years, the tight end, they cut him. So that left a couple of pretty big holes out there. So, they went in, they got a receiver in free agency, certainly not, somebody that was going to be a number 1 or number 2 guy. But now you get Travis Hunter, you've got Brian Thomas. Trevor Lawrence has really good weapons around him. So I think that's the biggest thing it does right there is you got, incredible players on either side there.
And he is quite a get for the Jags. And you've got some some stuff to kind of put a little bit of this in perspective for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, the Jaguars have had a first round pick in all 30 of the past drafts that they've been a part of, this being the 31st now. But, they had never traded down or I guess up that high to take a pick. So, it's big that they're trading up and they're trading away a first round pick next year. So again, that's a first for them. So they won't have a first round pick in 2026 unless they pull off some other trade this year or next year. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But so that's a big one. And then this is only going to be their second Heisman Trophy winner that will actually suit up in a Jags uniform for a regular season game. Now, I say regular season, that's important to note because right now it's just the first one ever was Desmond Howard, who won the 1991 Heisman at Michigan. He played with the Jaguars in their inaugural season, just a modest success there. They've had two other Heisman Trophy winners, very notable guys, suit up for them in the preseason, but they didn't make the squad. Ultimately, that was Tim Tebow, who, of course, we all remember his brief stint with the Jags, cut by his own college coach Urban Meyer that he won a won a national title for. And then the other was Andre Ware. Andre Ware was in that inaugural 1995 Jaguars team in the preseason, but of course got beat out by Mark Brunell and several other quarterbacks for that spot. So, just bringing in only their second Heisman Trophy winner, the first one that they're drafting. This one will probably make more of an impact than Desmond Howard did.
Do you think the Jacksonville Jags will let Travis Hunter play both sides of the ball?
Yes, in fact, last night in the very late press conferences that they held, both James Gladstone, the GM, and the new head coach Liam Cohen, they had both essentially said, look, we're going to get him in. His skill set, his best skill set is wide receiver right now. So we're going to get him into the wide receiver room, and then we're going to be teaching him some of the defensive things, but they want to kind of ingratiate him to the one side of the ball before the other. They do want to use him for both, but I think his snaps are going to be a lot more limited on defense than offense. However, if you know how bad that team was last year on defense, 32nd in the league, in fact, in passing yards allowed, then they're going to need a good player there. Now, they could certainly pick someone up now in the third round. They traded away the second rounder for tonight. There were a lot of people thought that they were going to take the cornerback Amos from Ole Miss. Well, now that's not going to be an option. So maybe they take a corner with their third pick, but they're going to have to build through the draft. Right now, going into the draft last night, the Jaguars had the fewest number of players signed to their actual active roster in the entire NFL, which means with 10 draft picks, and they still have 10 now, even after the trade. So they're going to be getting 10 draft picks. They're going to be looking at undrafted free agents, other free agents out there. They have a lot of spots to fill. So they also have a lot of, I guess you could say they have a lot of open space to work right now. And that's what James Gladstone wanted.
And I would imagine Trevor Lawrence is pretty happy to see a playmaker like Travis Hunter added to the roster.
Yeah, certainly. And, unfortunately, we haven't heard from Trevor Lawrence yet. Travis Hunter will be in Jacksonville today at 2 p.m. He'll be holding his press conference, his first one as a member of the Jaguars. The Florida Times Union will have photographers, reporters. We'll be doing all sorts of coverage. So you can check out jacksonville.com. We've been doing a lot of great work there before the draft and now leading up to it. But we haven't heard from Trevor. We did hear from Brian Thomas Jr. last night because one of our reporters, Gary Smits, was at the Lemon Bar on the Ocean.
Florida Live starts now.
Well, good afternoon to you and welcome into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer. Thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon, live on Fox Local, fox13news.com, fox35orlando.com, and also on YouTube. Coming up later in the show, we are going to talk about the Orlando Magic gearing up for basically a must-win Game 3 tonight at the Kia Center as they face the Boston Celtics down 2-0 in that playoff series. I really need a win tonight, and so we're going to talk with Tyler Karen from 96.9 The Game about that. Congressman Maxwell Frost in Orlando earlier today warning of threats to Social Security. We also talked with him about his recent trip to El Salvador and some other things as well. We're going to hear from him shortly. In our Tampa connection, more